How much pain can a man bear before life gives him a reason to live again? That question burned in Cyrus Whitmore's heart every morning when he woke to silence. The Arizona sun rose over his ranch like a fiery reminder that another lonely day had begun. Cyrus, 48, had once been a strong man with a quick laugh and dreams of raising a family. But 2 years ago, those dreams had died with his wife, Martha, and the stillborn son she'd never got to hold. Her death had hollowed him out. His house had become a place of ghosts and memories. His voice seldom heard except when he spoke to his horse or muttered to himself during chores. The ranch that had once been filled with life now felt like a graveyard of broken hopes. Cyrus worked because it kept him from thinking. He fixed fences, fed cattle, checked the wells, and buried himself in routine. When night came, he drank whiskey until his grief blurred enough for him to fall asleep. He had no reason to live, only a habit of surviving. That summer morning, the heat shimmered off the dry earth as he saddled his buckskin horse and rode into Tombstone for supplies. He didn't like town. It was too alive, full of miners chasing fortune, gamblers laughing too loud, and painted women calling from saloons. All of it made his loneliness feel heavier. But he needed ammunition, grain, and more whiskey. So he went. As he tied his horse outside Murphy's General Store, rough laughter drifted from across the street from a place called the Crimson Rose. Through the open doors, he saw men dancing with women in bright dresses under the glow of lanterns. The air inside shimmered with smoke, music, and sin. He was about to turn away when he saw her. A girl, maybe 15, with auburn hair pinned tight and green eyes too old for her young face. She moved among the crowd like she didn't belong, her forced smile hiding the fear in her eyes. She looked more like a prisoner than a dancer. The other women laughed and flirted, but she seemed to move by command, not choice. Cyrus's chest tightened. Something in that child's expression stirred a part of him he thought had died. The part that once protected, once cared. He couldn't look away. Her name was Hattie Delaney, though Cyrus didn't know it yet. Orphaned at 12 when fever took her parents, she had been taken in by her uncle Jasper Blackwell and his wife Willa, but they hadn't done it from love. They'd done it for profit. For 3 years, they kept her half-starved and overworked, and when she turned 14, they put her to work at their dance hall. Every smile she gave cost her dignity. Every mistake earned her bruises. Hattie had learned early that kindness always came with a price, and in her world, it was too high to pay. That night, the music played louder, and the smell of whiskey filled the air. Hattie danced with men who paid for her company, flinching at their hands in their crude laughter. One drunk miner pulled her close, his grip rough on her waist. She tried to smile to pretend it didn't scare her, but her body trembled. "Smile, prettier girl," hissed Willa from behind the bar. "These men pay good money. You'd best earn it." Hattie swallowed her shame and kept dancing. The man's hands roamed lower and panic flared in her chest. She twisted slightly, trying to pull away without causing trouble, but that only angered him. "Don't play shy," he growled, tightening his hold. Before she could speak, a voice cut through the noise. Calm, cold, and steady. "Let her go." The music faltered. The drunk turned to face a tall man standing near the doorway. His dusty hat shadowed a weathered face marked by grief and years of hard living. But his eyes, steel, blue, and unyielding, spoke of danger. "Mind your own business, old man," the drunk spat. Cyrus stepped closer, one hand resting on his gun belt. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. "You heard me." The drunk looked at him, then at the revolver. Something in the cowboy's stance made him back down. Muttering curses, he stumbled away. Cyrus looked at the girl. She was trembling, but her chin was lifted. "Thank you, mister," she whispered. "What's your name?" he asked Hattie. "Hattie Delaney." "How old are you, Hattie?" 15, she said, straightening, "a little old enough to take care of myself." He shook his head. No child should have to prove that. Before she could reply, Jasper Blackwell appeared. Slick smile, eyes cold as rattlesnake glass. "Mr. Whitmore, isn't it?" "Fine rancher, I hear. I hope our little girl hasn't caused you trouble." Cyrus's jaw tightened. "Seems to me she's the one being troubled." Jasper's smile thinned. "She's family. Works here by choice." Cyrus's eyes hardened. "Doesn't look like choice to me." The saloon went quiet. Even the piano stopped. Willow rushed over. her painted face twisted with fake outrage. "We have fed and clothed that girl since her folks passed. She owes us." "How much?" Cyrus said flatly. Jasper blinked. "What? How much does she owe you? Name your price." The man smirked, thinking he'd found a fool. $500, it was robbery. But Cyrus didn't blink. He reached into his coat and dropped silver coins on the table. "Done. She comes with me tonight." Gas filled the room. Jasper's jaw dropped, but Cyrus didn't wait for him to recover. He walked to Hattie. "Go pack your things." For a moment, she couldn't move. Was this real? Was freedom something a man could just buy? Under the vast desert sky, Cyrus lifted her onto his horse. She held her small bag, her mother's blue dress, her father's Bible, a single photograph. "Why would you spend that much on me?" she asked quietly. Cyrus looked up at the moonlit sky. "Lost my wife and daughter. Maybe this is God's way of giving me another chance to do right." The horse moved forward, hooves soft against the sand. For the first time in years, Cyrus felt something stir inside him, something warm, fragile, and alive. And for the first time in her life, had he dared to believe that maybe, just maybe, she wasn't alone anymore. The moon hung low over the Arizona desert as Cyrus rode home with Hattie. The night air smelled of sage and dust, and the stars shimmered like 1,000 tiny promises above them. For the first time in years, the silence around Cyrus didn't feel like loneliness. It felt like peace. When they reached the ranch, the world was still and quiet, except for the distant call of coyotes. Cyrus helped Hattie down gently. His hands were rough from years of ranch work, but his touch was careful, almost fatherly. He led her to the house, a sturdy wooden place with a wide porch and the soft glow of a lantern inside. "It ain't mutt," he said as she stepped in, "but it's honest. No one here will ever raise a hand to you." Hattie looked around, her eyes wide. The house smelled of wood smoke and coffee. There were shelves of books, a worn rocking chair, a table with 2 plates set out, like he'd been waiting for someone to join him all this time. "It's beautiful," she whispered. For the next few days, Hattie barely spoke. Years of fear had taught her that silence was safer. She woke before dawn, out of habit, and tried to find chores to do. Cleaning, washing dishes, sweeping the porch. Cyrus never stopped her, but he noticed. One morning when he found her scrubbing the floor on her knees, he knelt beside her and gently took the brush from her hand. "You don't have to earn your keep here," he said softly. "You've already got your place." Her eyes filled with tears. She tried to hide. "I don't know how to be someone's daughter," she whispered. He smiled faintly. "And I don't know how to be someone's father. Reckon we'll figure it out together." Over the following weeks, the ranch came back to life. Not with noise, but with something gentler. Laughter, conversation, hope. Cyrus taught Hattie how to ride properly, how to rope a calf, how to fix a broken fence. He showed her how to read the sky for rain, how to follow tracks in dry earth, how to aim a rifle steady without fear. She listened to every word like it was a gift. At night, they'd sit on the porch, watching the sunset fade into purple and gold. The desert wind carried the scent of mesquite and the sound of crickets. Sometimes Hattie would read aloud from her father's old Bible, her voice trembling at first, then growing stronger each night. Each day that passed, she looked less like the frightened girl from the dance hall and more like the young woman she was meant to become. But peace in the frontier never lasted long. One blistering afternoon, the sound of horses broke the quiet. Cyrus was mending a gate when he saw 3 riders approaching: Jasper Blackwell, Willa Granger, and Sheriff Tom Morrison. Dust trailed behind them like a warning. Cyrus straightened, his eyes narrowing. He recognized the sheriff, a man of law, not cruelty, but bound by duty. "Afternoon, Cyrus," Morrison said, tipping his hat. "Wish this was just a visit, but it ain't." Jasper's smirk returned slick and venomous. "You've got something that belongs to us. That girl, she's a minor, and we're her legal guardians. You had no right to take her." Cyrus's jaw clenched. "You had no right to sell her to drunks either." Willis sneered. "You don't know what you're talking about. We fed her, housed her. That girl owes us." Hattie stepped out onto the porch. Her hands were steady, her face calm, but her voice carried across the yard like a gunshot. "I don't owe you anything." Sheriff Morrison turned toward her, his expression troubled. Now, Hattie, I'm sorry, but the law says. The law didn't see what they did to me, she interrupted. The law didn't see the bruises, or the nights I went to bed hungry, or the men they made me dance for. The sheriff hesitated. Even Jasper's grin faltered for a moment. The sun beat down and the air felt thick with judgment. Cyrus stepped closer, his voice low but firm. She's not property. She's my daughter now. That's not how the law works. Jasper spat. She's coming with us. Before the sheriff could speak again, a new sound echoed from the road. Wagon wheels and hooves. One by one, riders appeared over the hill. It was Mrs. Elizabeth Patterson, the schoolteacher, her bonnet tied tight against the wind. Behind her rode Bill Hayes and his wife Sarah, then the Hendersons from the next valley. More followed, ranchers, townsfolk, even a few men from Tombstone who'd heard the story of the widowed cowboy who'd bought a girl's freedom. Mrs. Patterson climbed down from her buggy, eyes blazing. "You won't take that child back to that place," she said, her voice cutting through the heat. "Any God-fearing soul can see she's better here than she ever was with them." Sarah Hayes nodded. "Look at her. Does she look mistreated to you, Sheriff? Look how strong she stands. Look at the light back in her eyes." Jasper tried to shout them down, but no one listened. The people had seen enough cruelty to know the difference between right and wrong. Sheriff Morrison looked at the crowd, at their firm faces, their steady eyes, and finally sighed. He took the folded papers from his pocket, then tucked them back in. "Sometimes," he said slowly, "the spirit of the law matters more than the letter." Jasper went red with fury. "You'll regret this, all of you," he roared, jerking his horse around. But the crowd didn't move. Not one person stepped aside. Hattie stood beside Cyrus, her small hand gripping his arm. For the first time, she didn't feel afraid. She felt safe, protected, home. As the riders disappeared into the horizon, the crowd began to disperse, leaving behind a peace that felt like a blessing. Cyrus looked down at her and smiled. "You know what this means, don't you?" She tilted her head. "What?" "You're stuck with me now, official-like, with the whole county as witnesses." For the first time in her life, Hattie laughed. A pure, joyful sound that filled the quiet ranch air. "Good," she said softly, "because I was getting attached to this place." The days after the standoff felt like a new beginning for both of them. The ranch, once filled with silence and grief, was now alive with laughter, music, and the sound of two hearts learning to heal. Cyrus still woke before dawn, as he always had. But now when he looked out the window and saw Hattie feeding the chickens or humming softly as she gathered eggs, something inside him eased. The loneliness that had lived in his chest for years began to fade. Hattie had changed too. Her fear had turned into quiet strength. She walked with confidence, her eyes no longer shadowed by pain. The scars from her past hadn't vanished, but they no longer defined her. She had work, purpose, and most of all, love. The kind that didn't come with a price. Every day she learned something new. How to brand cattle, how to patch a torn saddle, how to whistle for the horse to come running. Cyrus taught her to plant corn straight and ride tall, to face problems head-on instead of running from them. And she taught him something too, how to smile again. One evening, as the sky burned golden red over the desert hills, Hattie sat on the porch steps with a piece of paper in her lap. Cyrus leaned against the post, sipping his coffee. What's that you're working on?" he asked. She held up the paper shilly. "Mrs. Patterson says, I'm ready to take the entrance test for teacher training next year." I thought, maybe I could teach other girls one day, ones like me, ones who don't know they're worth something. Cyrus smiled, his heart swelling with pride. "You'd be a fine teacher, smart, steady, and strong as a Mustang." Hattie blushed and laughed. "Don't say that. You'll make me cry." "Well," he said with a grin, "nothing wrong with tears that come from happiness, but happiness in the frontier was fragile, and both knew the desert had a way of testing those who dared to dream." One night, months later, a storm rolled over the valley. Lightning split the sky, and thunder shook the windows. Cyrus was closing the barn doors when he saw a dark figure on horseback, riding hard toward the house. His hand went to his gun before he recognized the sheriff's horse. Tom Morrison dismounted, rain pouring off his hat. "Evening, Cyrus," he called over the storm. "You'd best come inside. We need to talk." Inside, dripping and cold, Morrison looked uneasy. "Jasper Blackwell's dead," he said finally. Got himself shot trying to rob a stagecoach outside Bisbee. Will packed up and left town. Figured you should know. Cyrus nodded slowly. Reckon that chapter's over. Then Morrison tipped his hat. That girl of yours, she's got a real chance now. Don't let her waste it, lad. When the sheriff rode off into the storm, Cyrus turned to find Hattie standing behind him. She'd heard. Her face was pale, her green eyes wide. He's gone, she asked quietly. Yeah, Cyrus said. You're free for good now. Foro. She looked out at the rain falling over the ranch. They're home, and took a deep breath. I was free the day you found me, she said softly. Ms. passed and the seasons turned. Spring painted the desert in wildflowers. Hattie grew taller, stronger, her hands calloused from work, but her heart light. She kept studying under Mrs. Patterson's guidance, and when the next summer came, she rode to Tombstone to take her exams. The same town that had once been her prison now felt like a doorway to a better life. People nodded to her respectfully, calling her Miss Delaney, the girl who'd survived and changed everything. When she returned to the ranch holding her test papers, Cyrus was waiting by the corral. Well, he asked, I passed. She laughed, waving the papers. Mrs. Patterson says, I'll start teaching this fall. Cyrus lifted her off the ground in a rough, happy hug. That's my girl, he said, his voice thick with pride. You've made me proud, Hattie. Later that evening, as the sun set behind the distant mountains, they sat together on the porch just as they had so many times before. The desert stretched endlessly before them, quiet, vast, and beautiful. You ever think about how different our lives would be if we hadn't crossed paths that night? Hattie asked softly. Cyrus looked at her, his weathered face softened by a rare smile. Every day, guess the Lord knew we both needed saving, just sent us to each other to get the job done. The wind stirred, carrying the scent of sage and rain. Coyotes called in the distance, their voices rising in song. Hattie leaned her head on his shoulder. You think Mama and Daddy can see me? I know they can, he said, and I reckon Martha's smiling too, seeing us both finally at peace. The sky darkened and the stars came out bright and endless. A lonely widower had found his reason to live again. A broken girl had found her home. Together they'd built something unshakable, a bond stronger than blood, born out of pain, kindness, and second chances. That night, as they sat in the glow of the lantern light, Hattie whispered, Thank you. Cyrus looked over. For what, daughter? For seeing me when nobody else did. He smiled gently. You didn't need saving, Hattie. You just needed someone to remind you you're worth saving. And with that, the old cowboy and his daughter watched the desert stars, their hearts finally whole. Two lost souls who'd found each other in a world that had almost broken them both. Because sometimes love doesn't come from where you expect. Sometimes it rides in quiet, steady and true, like a cowboy's promise beneath an endless Arizona sky.